Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Whipple. I'm from the Office of Procurement Operations in the Department of Homeland Security. I'm going to give you all a brief, and when I say brief, I mean about 25, 30 minutes-ish overview of the contract or award negotiations process. I'm going to use contract and award almost interchangeably. Nothing I'm telling you today is a secret. It's not protected. It's not a guarantee of anything. It's also non-binding on DHS. I do want to mention that processes live and breathe. They move around. We change them from time to time. The contracting process is no exception. So think of this as a snapshot in time of what it looks like when someone from my office is working with you to negotiate a contract award. Real quick, so I give you, if there's no number next to it, that's only one slide up there. So we're not going to keep you guys forever. It's not going to be completely death by PowerPoint. We will move pretty quickly. So real quick, I want to just set the stage for you a little bit where we are. Everyone should probably see this flowchart or has seen this flowchart several times. This is also in the announcement that's on sam.gov. And so what we're talking about here is that we're going to assume that you got through all the stage gates, your industry engagement piece. You were encouraged to submit a written proposal. And then there was a technical and scientific merit review that went great. You were selected by the topic manager, and then CO concurs, and then finally funds get identified to fund the work of your proposal. Which brings us to the wonderful dark cloud that is award negotiations, which is what I'm going to be talking to you all about today. Hopefully we'll be able to demystify a little bit of that process for you. So first up, we're going to talk about email. Hopefully everyone gets that joke. Everyone in here should be old enough to get the you've got mail joke. Couldn't get the sound file, sorry. So you're going to get an email from the portal that tells you you've been selected for award pending successful negotiations. So what? What does that mean? It means stay in your seat, don't adjust your set. The award negotiations process is about to commence, but has not commenced yet. And above all, don't start working on your proposal yet, please. What it means in just layman's terms is that if award negotiations between someone from my office, from OPO, go smoothly with your organization, then you can reasonably expect that there will be a final signed contract award that will fund your proposal work, and you'll be able to go for whatever that period of performance ends up being. Let's talk about that second email. You've got mail again. So second email comes from someone in my office, either a contracting officer or a contract specialist will be reaching out to you. There are 3 elements to that email. First one is going to be and I'm not endorsing Microsoft when I say this, but it will be a Word version of that statement of work that you embedded in your written proposal. There'll probably be a copy of the WIBIS as well. There will also be a blank copy of our data rights assertions template, which is also part of the LRBAA announcement. The third element is, it's important, it's not critical, but an offer for you to have a meeting with DHS staff. That would include the contracting staff and a technical SME who's going to be, your technical POC for the duration of that award negotiation. All the communications usually go through whoever the contracting staff are, but that first meeting, we usually try and offer it in a time that gives you time to review everything that we've sent you on that initial email. And I think I said this already, but the meeting's not mandatory. But I've never run across anyone that's regretted having that initial meeting and any of the subsequent meetings, just because it keeps communication going and makes the entire process so much smoother. It's not even funny. All right, so before we go further, I have some assumptions for you, just because otherwise we will be here till dinner time. I know no one wants that. So first, we're assuming that your proposal was complete. You followed all the instructions and that my pointer actually works. Because you're just that good at following instructions. Everything was in order. Nothing was missing. If I say your organization, I am talking about a either commercial entity, Okay, so your traditional government contractor, a nonprofit, they are different, or an academic institution. What I'm not talking about is an FFRDC operating contractor or a university affiliated research center. The reason I'm not talking about those is because those processes for awards to those two types of organizations, very different. They follow a completely different path and a completely different process to get to a final agreement. And if you don't know what either of those are, your organization probably isn't one. All right. Also, assuming that your organization meets all the criteria for either a FAR-based Part 15 contract award or another transaction agreement. Not going to get in detail into the eligibility criteria for either one of those. Just know that that is the assumption that I'm making here. And then last, when I say award, I mean either a FAR Part 15 contract or another transaction agreement for research or for prototype. You're probably going to say, hey, wait a minute, there's other types of awards that the LRBAA contemplates. Yes, you're right. There's contracts, there's grants, there's cooperative agreements, interagency agreements. We're not talking about those because, again, I don't want to keep everybody here till dinner if we don't have to. I prefer not to. So real quick, just for the sake of discussion here, the process steps broken down in about 5 of them. Agree on the technical scope, agree on the data rights, agree on cost, and then agree on terms. And last but not least, sign the award. Now, in my office, we're small. We try to move efficiently. Sometimes we will combine some of these steps in a couple of different ways, either because we need to or just because it's more convenient. Regardless of which way we engage in this, signing the award is always the final step. We won't necessarily go in order. Sometimes we'll agree on the cost before the technical scope, which is rare, but it has happened. But signing the award is always last. So let's talk about the technical scope. Statement of work. Remember, you followed directions. Your proposal was complete. You had a statement of work in there. Government technical manager or topic manager, excuse me, takes that, reworks it into an editable statement of work. There's a copy of your WBIS included in there. That is the basis for the technical scope of the award that we hope to get to yes to at the end of this process. The thing to know about the negotiations and agreement on the technical scope, I've listed a few things that are the most common things that I see raised, clarifying what the critical path of the project is. Deliverable timing and content is a very, very frequent one. Another one is if for some reason DHS S&T decides that they would like you to participate in a showcase of the technology. S&T does tech showcases from time to time. And then also if for some reason your technology needs to be sent through T&E, either through another part of DHS, or sometimes we do bring in other federal agencies to do T&E, or sometimes it's just a case of they're there on a consultative basis to S&T in that particular project. That happens fairly frequently. One thing I do want to stress is that we're not going to rewrite the technical scope of your proposal into something that you did not initially propose. There may be some changes just because of, maybe it's better content-wise for a deliverable for a few changes, but we're not rewriting the entire technical scope of the project in this process. So data rights, which is a wonderful, invigorating topic. So you probably asserted some data rights or included some assertions in your initial proposal. We're not saying that you have to change those, but I will say that I have seen it where in negotiating the technical scope of the proposal and of the statement of work, there's often changes that have to happen to those data rights assertions. Maybe it's a case of just thinking of a software example from a recent negotiation I was involved in. It wasn't version 7 that they were asserting data rights to. It was actually, version 8. So that level of specificity, it does happen when we're working on these data rights assertions or refreshing them for us when we request it. Specifics are gold. The contracting staff will take those, we'll ingest those, review them, but we also review those in coordination with our IP counsel in the department. We don't necessarily involve the lawyers and means unless we absolutely have to, much like I hope most of you don't either, because that's never good to bring two lawyers to the same meeting. The one thing about data rights from prior government contracts, contract numbers, and the names of the awarding agencies. I believe we ask for that in the LRBAA announcement. If we don't, I'm going to make sure that we do because I'm also the BAA contracting officer. But that level of specificity, like I said, is golden and exactly what we need. Also, if you include it up front, it makes it so much easier on us later on. And if I didn't say it already, we're not trying to steal your IP. We wouldn't know what to do with it. Agreeing on cost, when you put together your wonderfully complete proposal, because you follow directions perfectly, as everyone in this world does, you proposed a contract type. We don't unilaterally go around changing contract types that get proposed, unless for some reason, I have seen it where the contractor's accounting system wasn't suitable for the award of a flexibly priced contract. Hopefully you understood that mishmash of words I just said, which just necessitates us renegotiating it into something that's on a fixed price basis. That does happen, but we don't do it on a whim. You're going to know about it. It's not going to be a surprise. We will talk to you about it extensively before if we have to change the contract type for some reason. Your accounting system and who your Cognizant Federal Audit Agency are, those are two items that are very important if you've got supporting audit reports and things like that. We will typically ask for those as part of working on the cost proposal. We will ask you to refresh that cost proposal just because you've gone through, maybe it's 4 to 6 months since you initially did those cost numbers. We get it. Cost is sometimes a moving target for a lot of organizations. That's why we ask you to do that refresh when we're nearing the end of the award negotiations process. When you're putting together cost proposals, it's also a good idea even just in drafting the written proposal. The SOW task should link to your WBIS. Your WBIS should also link to your cost proposal. So we could actually draw a dotted line if we really wanted to from the cost proposal all the way back to the tasks in the statement of work. That's one of the things that makes it really hard for us to do cost analysis. To put it in perspective, all of our contract specialists are trained in cost analysis. We only have 2 dedicated actual cost analysts that support us for the 1,300 some odd actions we do in a fiscal year. So specificity, very, very helpful. All right, and then one word on OTs. If you proposed an OT for research or an OT for prototype, for the OTs for research, or I'm sorry, for OTs for prototype, they do have a cost share requirement for entities that are more traditional government contractors. Just something to be aware of when you're putting together cost proposals. If we are negotiating an OT award with you, we will mention that as part of the negotiations process in one or more of those meetings, if not in that initial email. Agreeing on terms. This is just sort of the greatest hits of items that that we typically negotiate in just a traditional contract. Invoicing frequency is one where, generally speaking, it's going to be monthly. Only exception to that that's notable is that if you're working on a fixed price where payments are tied to achievement of milestones, that'll be a little bit different because maybe your first payment isn't until you reach milestone 1, which may not be until month 2 of the contract. So you don't have an invoice for month 1. That's a typical item that happens. Flexibly priced awards, there is always, so when I'm talking about your cost type, your cost plus cost reimbursement, your T&M, your labor hour, there's always a requirement to notify the government when you reach a certain funding level. And that's not on our books, that's on your accounting books. When you get to that level, that is based off of your company's or your organization's accounting system. When it says you're at whatever that level is, typically it's either 75 or 85% expenditure. That's when you should be reaching out to the contracting officer for your award and saying, hey, by the way, we just hit 75% expenditure, and give a new estimate of completion and say, hey, is DHS going to be providing additional funding or something like that? Typically, that's how those notifications read when I see them. One of the other things that we get a lot of conversations about is post-award reporting, E-Verify. Most organizations at this point are compliant with E-Verify. The service contract reporting that happens annually, folks from my office will always ping you for that. That is something that affects the LRBAA awards. We can't do an exception for that. We've looked into that several times at the request of a lot of our contractors. New for this iteration of the LRBAA is, so there's post-award during contract performance reporting requirements, but new for this iteration of the LRBAA is a post-contract, I guess we'll call it a check back, if you will, or a sort of a where are they now, that is usually run through S&T, through the LRBAA office, sort of just seeing, you know, so we had this contract with the federal government, you all developed the technology, what ultimately became of that technology after that contract's period of performance expired, what happened to it, is it out in the commercial marketplace, did it not go anywhere? The exact wording for that hasn't been solidified just because we haven't made any 2401 based awards yet, and again, it's new for this iteration. We take information security seriously. I know if you were in Mr. Aziz's briefs next door, he talked about privacy specifically, but we take when we're talking about awards, we take that a more expansive view, controlled and classified information. There was a final rule that went into the Federal Register last year. You might have seen it in July. So that's all been codified into our regulations. We don't address it to the nines in every award we do, but we address it in every award that we do in some way. So those are just some terms to just be aware of and be sensitive to. And then key personnel is another one that's very important. Our minimum is usually whoever your principal investigator is. If there are other staff that we feel are integral to the effort, we might identify those ourselves, or, you know, often the organization will say, hey, not just my PI, but also the co-PI, or, you know, if there's a project manager that's specifically assigned to that particular effort, they'll be identified as well. Last but not least, sign the award. As I said, it always comes last. At some point during award negotiations, when we get to the point where we've agreed on terms, you know, and all the data rights assertions and the cost, our best practice is to provide a draft watermarked copy of whatever the final award is going to be. Now, I can't say exactly when that is, but it's a best practice for us to do that, usually when we're getting very close to getting the final award ready for signature. It'll say draft right on it. It'll be a big watermark across it. And our contracting staff will be very clear, this is not for signature. But we will send you a clean copy that is for signature. Your organization will sign first. The DHS contracting official will always sign second. If there's ever a question about what the date of award for an award is, we usually go by the contracting officer's signature unless there's something else in that agreement that says otherwise. Performance begins after that. You'll also get a letter of delegation for a contracting officer's representative, which is not always the technical subject matter expert within S&T. They do have a cadre of CORs where all they do is monitor contracts on OPO's behalf. They're very, very good at their job and have been pretty invaluable to us over the years. If you are working on a contract that requires classified access or manipulating classified information, we'll also generate a DE Form 254 that's usually not included in the initial award. That'll get added in your very first modification, though. Word about meetings, everyone's favorite topic, right? They're not a condition of getting an award. They're not a condition of getting to yes. Generally speaking, there's around 2 to 4 over the course of an award negotiation. As I said earlier, they're optional, but they are very, very helpful. I'm not saying you have to take the meeting, but I'd consider it seriously. It beats just an email fight back and forth where everyone's just constantly sending emails and they accomplish a lot more quickly. When you're talking about who should go to those meetings, we will sometimes make the recommendation that, hey, recognizing that whoever we're talking to may just be a technical subject matter expert, not necessarily an expert in federal contracting. We might say, hey, reach out to, in the case of your universities, your sponsored programs office. Or if you have a contracting professional on staff, we'll say, hey, it might be a good idea if you bring them to this meeting, if you have such a person in your staff there. If it's a conversation about costs, we'll sometimes recommend that you bring your accountant. I don't know who people want to talk to less, their accountant or their lawyer, but you know, it varies with organization to organization. And then last but not least, probably the question that I get the most: how long does this process take? And I'm going to give you what I've heard referred to today as the economist answer or the professional consultant answer, which is it depends. Just as no two submissions under the LRBAA are the same, no two award negotiations are the same either. We try to treat each in our office, you know, as its own unique thing, because every contract does stand alone, you know, both legally and just in the way that we treat them, because not every contract requires an extremely hands-on approach. Some of the drivers include the technical or cost complexity. Often the two are the same. I have seen some where the cost is extremely complicated and the technical piece is very, very straightforward and simple, but that can make it take longer. The value, we have review thresholds. You know, our lowest one is $500,000 and they only get bigger. And then the levels of review go up and up and up. It's a case of, do we have to coordinate with our attorneys who are experts in procurement law to review the award? Is it a case of we need to involve our head of contracting activity? Or do we have to go even all the way up to our chief procurement officer? That's very unlikely. I've never seen that under an LRBAA award, but I have seen our HCA have to approve a few here and there over the years. And then status of your organization systems, purchasing systems, accounting systems, that can have an impact as well. There's also the added fact of once we hit $4 million in total contract value, we do have to send a notification to Congress. That's been baked into our appropriations every fiscal cycle that I know of for the last 15, 20 years. And then all that to say, patience is key, both on your side and on our side. You know, it just does not help the process if folks get impatient. I know that the process can sometimes drag on and seem to take a little while, but patience is key. With that, thank you. Appreciate your time, appreciate your engagement. Thank you for coming. If you need some light reading, that third link on there is our FAR supplement. Very helpful to, you know, raise the energy levels after you've been listening to this. There's also 2 links on there that are very important. The Do Business with DHS, that is our general Doing Business with DHS link. That is not specific to R&D. That covers links for almost everything that we do in the department. The second one is specific to DHS S&T. Thank you very much, folks.